The wind whipped down Wabash Avenue and rattled the elevated tracks overhead. Luke Ramirez hunched inside his coat, flexed his fingers once, then set them on the yellowed keys of the upright piano. The piano was old. Its finish was chipped, one leg wrapped in duct tape, a caster propped on a brick so it would not wobble. Tonight, it sat a few feet back from the curb, under the tracks beside a lamppost wrapped in blinking Christmas lights. Luke drew a breath that stung his lungs and let his hands fall into an easy progression. The first notes of Silent Night floated out thin at first, then fuller as his muscles remembered how to forget the cold. Each chord rang against concrete and steel, drifting around the small knot of people who had slowed to listen. Beside him, perched on a milk crate lined with an old cushion, Mia swung her booted feet in time. The boots were a size too big, and the puffy coat swallowed her shoulders, but she sat straight, chin lifted. A paper star was taped to the side of the piano, colored in with highlighter, and labeled in uneven letters, "Holiday Requests Welcome." She hummed along without thinking. When he dropped the melody down, she picked up the words. Silent Night, Holy Night. A passing couple slowed, smiled, and tucked a folded bill into the chipped blue mug on top of the piano. Luke glanced at the mug, then at Mia. She caught his look and leaned toward him. "That one felt like a 5, she whispered when the couple moved on. He kept his eyes on the keys. It was a 10. Cars hissed through slush beyond the pool of lamplight. On the other side of the street, the glow from a coffee shop spilled warm and gold onto the sidewalk. In the shadow of a closed storefront, halfway between the coffee shop and the corner, a girl stood very still. She had found a strip of brick wall where the wind did not cut quite so hard. Her sneakers were wet at the seams. A gray hoodie hung off her frame. The hood was up, cinched tight, but wisps of blonde hair stuck out, and the skin of her cheeks was chapped. Zoe did not seem to notice the cold. Her hands were jammed into the pouch of the hoodie, fingers curled around the strap of a small backpack, pressed flat to her stomach. Now and then her thumb brushed the cool edge of metal at her throat, hidden just under the fabric. She watched Luke's hands. They moved with an easy certainty that did not match the battered piano or the chipped mug. His fingers were nicked and rough knuckles reddened by work and winter, but they knew exactly where to land. Something in Zoe's chest pulled tight. The song changed. Silent Night gave way to a softer, slower melody that did not belong to the usual carols. It started with 3 high notes spaced just so like a question. They hung in the air a moment longer than usual. Zoe's head tilted before she realized she was moving. The next line of the melody dropped lower, then rose again, curling back toward those first 3 notes as if they were home. A shape flickered at the back of her mind. Not a full picture, more like the memory of warmth. A lamp with a yellow shade. A woman humming, hands larger than hers guiding her small fingers along cool keys. Zoe closed her eyes. The cold under her feet blurred. The hunger and the ache in her shoulders, the restless buzz that had chased her from block to block, all of it thinned until there was only the sound. A train roared overhead, cars clattering past. For a moment, the music nearly disappeared. When the noise dropped away, the piano was still there, looping through that strange melody. She knew those notes. The recognition landed deep in her bones. Across the avenue, a black SUV idled at the curb, its engine a quiet hum. Inside, behind tinted glass, a woman sat with her phone forgotten in her lap. Evelyn Hart had not meant to stop. Her driver had slowed at the light, and then she had caught the edge of the scene from the corner of her eye. A piano under the tracks, a man in a worn coat, a little girl singing through a cloud of her own breath, and another figure smaller and farther back, standing just inside the reach of the lamppost's light. "Ms. Hart," her driver asked, "do you want me to keep going?" "Wait," she said. She leaned forward, one hand braced on the back of the front seat, and studied the girl in the shadows. The child did not step closer, but her whole body angled toward the music. When the man shifted, Evelyn saw the girl's profile for a heartbeat, the line of her nose, the stubborn set of her chin. Something hot burned behind Evelyn's eyes. Her hand rose to her collarbone, searching for the familiar weight of a silver chain that was not there. Another train rattled past overhead. The piano kept playing. The little girl in the shadows did not move. She stood on the border between dark and light, between the coffee shop's glow and the open night, as if the wrong step in either direction might scatter the fragile notes hanging in the winter air. Luke finished the strange little melody and let his hands slide into something more familiar. The notes of a jazzed-up "Deck the Halls" scattered into the cold air. People who had been hurrying past slowed again, some of them smiling, a few fishing for wallets. He felt the prickle of being watched and glanced up. That was when he saw her. Not the girl singing beside him, but the one in the shadows across from the coffee shop. Small, blonde, too still. The way her eyes tracked his fingers reminded him of students he used to teach in another life. He held her gaze for a heartbeat. Her shoulders tightened, as if she expected to be chased away. He turned back to the piano and called over his shoulder, easy and casual. "You know any requests?" he asked loudly enough for the small gathered crowd, but not so loud that it would land on her alone. "My assistant here takes them." Mia straightened on her crate, taking the cue. "We know all the Christmas songs," she announced. "Almost all." That got a laugh from someone. A teenager in a knit beanie raised a hand. "Play something from a movie," he said. "That sad one, with the kid in the balloons." Mia made a face. "That is not a Christmas movie." "Maybe he just wants sad," Luke said. "Cold Street, hot chocolate, existential crisis." The teenager laughed again. Mia leaned in toward Luke. "You can do the balloon song right. I can fake the balloon song." He shifted chords again, feeling the girl in the shadows, like a weight on the edge of his vision. The melody from the film was simple and slow, built to hurt a little. Mia hummed a thin harmony over the top. A trio of college kids stopped near the front, one of them already pulling out her phone. "This is so going on my feed," she said to her friend. "Street dad with tiny singer. Look at her. She is working for that tip jar." Mia heard and lifted her voice without needing to be told. Luke heard the phone chime as the recording started. He did not look at it. He watched the girl across the street instead. She had moved a little closer, not much, half a step. It put her shoes in the ring of dirty light cast by the lamppost. Her toes were red where the sneakers had split at the seams. When the song ended, the small cluster around the piano applauded. The girl with the phone came forward and tucked a bill into the mug. She angled her camera for a last shot, catching Mia's grin, the chipped keys, a blur of blonde hair near the edge of the frame, and the quick flash of something silver at a thin throat. "Thanks, you just made my Christmas content," she said. "Happy holidays." "Happy holidays," Mia answered, proud and earnest. The crowd thinned. The wind picked up again, sharp and unfriendly. Luke rubbed his palms together and breathed on them. He checked the time on his phone. The numbers glowed back at him. They still had a little while before he needed to pack up if they wanted the last train home. Mia followed his look. "One more?" she asked. "One more," he agreed. He had to choose something upbeat. That was how he tried to end nights out here. Something with a little swing so they could walk away feeling like they had stolen back a piece of the winter instead of the other way around. He set a bright rhythm. Mia clapped along. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw the girl in the shadows shiver. The motion broke whatever spell had been holding her so rigid. Her knees bent, her shoulders hunched, the small backpack hitched higher on her chest. Luke let the song wind down to a softer ending than usual. The last chord faded into the sound of tires passing through slush and a distant siren. "All right," he said, straightening. "That is us for tonight. Tip your server. She works for Marshmallows." Mia giggled and hopped off the crate to start gathering up sheet music that had never actually been needed. The girl across the street flinched as if someone had shouted. She turned away from the corner and took one step down the block, then another, as if being pulled toward the dark instead of walking. Luke watched her go. He heard his father's voice in his head, full of that rough army certainty. "You see a kid alone at night, you do not look away." "Mia," he said quietly. She looked up, following his line of sight, and saw the small figure retreating. The coffee shop door opened behind them. A curl of warm air wrapped around the piano. The barista, a woman with streaks of silver in her hair, leaned out and called, "You two need anything for the road? I got a pot of the cheap stuff still going." "We are good, Mrs. Jenkins," Luke said. He nodded toward the girl. "But if you have a spare cup." Mrs. Jenkins followed his glance, eyes softening, when she spotted the hoodie and the bare ankles. "You want cocoa or coffee, sweetheart?" she called. The girl stiffened. Her head turned slightly toward the sound, but she did not answer. "She will take cocoa," Luke said. "Lots of sugar. Scientific requirement." Mrs. Jenkins laughed. "Coming right up." The girl hesitated, then took a few wary steps back toward the lamppost, as if the offer itself might vanish if she moved too fast. Luke moved slowly too. He did not stride across the street or throw grand gestures. He just lifted the piano lid halfway, then closed it gently, his hands never leaving where she could see them. When he reached the curb, he lifted a hand in a small wave. "Cold night to be standing alone," he said. She eyed him, then looked past him to Mia, who was wrestling the milk crate into a canvas bag. "I am not alone," the girl said. Her voice was hoarse, unused. Luke nodded once. "All right, cold night to be talking to strangers then." The corner of her mouth twitched, as if it wanted to smirk, but had forgotten how. Mrs. Jenkins arrived with a paper cup, steam curling from the lid. "Here you go," she said, holding it out. On the house, extra chocolate. You look like you could use it." The girl's gaze darted from the cup to the woman's face, then to Luke again. There was calculation in her eyes and something else beneath it. Hunger, not just for the drink. She stepped forward and took the cup with both hands. Heat flooded her fingers through the thin cardboard. She sucked in a shaky breath as the warmth hit her chest. "Thank you," she murmured. "That coat of yours is doing about half a job," Mrs. Jenkins said. "You kids staying nearby?" "Mrs. Jenkins," Luke said gently. The barista seemed to hear what he did not say. She gave the girl one more searching look, then patted Luke's arm and retreated toward her shop. Mia sidled up beside the piano, hugging her arms around herself. "Dad," she whispered, "we really gonna leave her here?" The girl pretended not to hear, but her shoulders drew tighter. Luke glanced at the train schedule posted on the pole, at the thin figure in the too big hoodie, at his daughter, rubbing her hands together for warmth. He knew what the practical voices would say. He did not know the girl. He did not know what trouble might follow her. He certainly did not know how he was going to pay rent in 2 months, let alone add another mouth to feed even for one night. The piano keys flashed in his mind. The way her eyes had focused when he played that strange lullaby. That had not been casual curiosity. That had been recognition. He blew out a breath that fogged in front of him. "You got somewhere to sleep?" he asked the girl. She lifted one shoulder. It could have meant anything. Yes. No. The streets. A shelter. A random stairwell. "Inside," he added, "with walls and a door that locks." She stared into the swirl of steam rising from the cocoa. Mia stepped forward before Luke could. She stuck out her hand as if introducing herself at a school assembly. "I am Mia," she said. "That is my dad. Our place is really small, but the heater works most of the time and we have an extra blanket. It smells like old pizza, but you get used to it." The girl blinked at the offered hand. "Zoe," she said finally. "My name is Zoe." Her fingers were ice cold when they touched Mia's. Luke closed the piano lid the rest of the way and began to strap it onto the dolly. "All right, Zoe," he said quietly. "You can come with us. Just tonight. You can change your mind in the morning." Zoe nodded once, sharp and quick, as if any slower movement might make him rethink the offer. He let Mia walk between them while he pushed the piano toward the station. Snow clung in clumps to the wheels. The city was full of sirens and laughter, and the hum of 1,000 lives. But in the strip of sidewalk under the tracks, it felt for a moment like the world had narrowed to 3 sets of footsteps, and the faint fading echo of a melody that none of them could quite name. Behind them across the street, the black SUV pulled away from the curb and joined the slow line of holiday traffic, its taillights disappearing into the red and white blur. Morning crept into the apartment in thin stripes of light that slipped past the blinds and painted the wall beside the bunk bed. Zoe woke all at once, like someone surfacing from deep water. For a second, she did not know where she was. Her fingers tightened on something soft and worn under her chin. It was a stuffed animal, a raccoon with one button eye gone. The blanket that covered her smelled faintly of laundry detergent and pizza, and the lemon cleaner they used on the hallway floors. Above her, the springs of the top bunk creaked as Mia rolled over. "You are awake," Mia said, upside down, her face suddenly hanging over the edge. Her dark curls dangled toward Zoe's pillow. "You move a lot when you sleep. You kick the wall like 100 times." Zoe blinked at her, then pushed herself up to sitting. The room was small. One dresser, one narrow closet door that did not quite close. A poster of a cartoon astronaut taped to the wall corners, curling where the tape had given up. On the far side of the room, a space had been cleared on the floor for a backpack and a pair of shoes. Not hers, Mia's school stuff. Her own backpack was at the end of the bed right where she had dropped it last night. She exhaled just enough to be heard. The air in the apartment was warmer than the street, but still carried a draft. Somewhere beyond the bedroom, a pan hissed. The smell of pancake batter and something a little burnt drifted in. Mia dropped to the lower bunk and sat beside her, knees touching. "You drooled a little," Maya said. "It is fine. I used to do that when we first moved here. Dad said it means your brain is working hard while you sleep." Zoe scrubbed at the corner of her mouth with the back of her hand, just in case. "I do not drool," she muttered. "Okay," Mia said. She bumped her shoulder lightly against Zoe's. "I do not snore either." Their eyes met. The moment stretched fragile and almost funny. Zoe felt the tightness in her chest ease just enough for something like a smile to form small and unsteady. Luke tapped on the doorframe with his knuckles. "Breakfast is ready," he said. "Come eat before the smoke alarm decides to sing." The kitchen and living room were the same space. A sagging couch faced a small television. The coffee table was pushed closer to make room for a fold-out bed that was currently folded back into a couch again. The kitchenette was lined along one wall, a sink, a fridge with 2 magnets, a stove with 1 burner that did not light properly. Plates waited on the table chipped, but clean. 3 stacks of pancakes uneven and golden in spots and a little too dark in others. A bottle of syrup waited in the middle like the centerpiece in a restaurant that was doing its best. Zoe hovered near the doorway until Mia grabbed her hand and tugged her toward a chair. "You get the good spot," Mia said. "It is not next to the draft." Luke slid a plate in front of each of them. He was still in the same jeans as last night, but he had changed into a gray t-shirt. His hair looked slightly less windblown. "Eat slow," he told them. "We make it look like there is more." Mia drowned her pancakes in syrup, humming under her breath. Zoe looked at the food for a long second. Her stomach cramped. She picked up her fork and cut off a small piece, almost careful enough to be polite, then put it in her mouth and did not bother being careful after that. She tried to pace herself. She failed. Half the stack disappeared before she realized she was eating like she expected someone to take the plate away. Luke pretended not to notice the speed. What he did notice was the way she flinched each time someone in a neighboring apartment closed a door too hard. Her eyes jumped to the front door every time a footstep passed in the hall. "Coffee for me," he said lightly. "Juice for Mia. Water for Zoe, unless you are a coffee person, in which case we need to talk about life choices." "Water is fine," Zoe said. Her voice was clearer in the morning light, less gravelly. Mia chewed a mouthful of pancake and spoke around it. "Zoe, you want to see the view?" she asked. "It is not that exciting. It is a brick wall and a dumpster. But sometimes there is a squirrel." Zoe swallowed, wiped syrup from her fingers on the edge of her napkin, and let herself be dragged to the window. The glass was cold under her fingertips. Outside, the alley was quiet snow pressed along the edges of the dumpsters and stacked on the lids like frosting. Someone had left a string of cheap tinsel on a fire escape. It fluttered whenever the wind made it down between the buildings. "That is Mr. Patel's store," Mia said, pointing to the backside of a small shop whose front door opened on the street around the corner. "He sells cereal and lottery tickets and sometimes gives me gum for free, but Dad pretends to be mad when he sees it." She paused. "Do you have a store like that where you live?" Zoe stared at the alley a second longer. "Sometimes," she said. "Sometimes I sleep near one." Mia did not say anything to that. She just nodded slowly and went back to her chair. Luke watched them settle again. "You okay with going out for a bit later?" he asked. "People are still in a generous mood the day after Christmas. Shoppers, tourists, folks trying to feel good about themselves." Mia perked up. "Can we go to the corner with the big tree this time? The one by the plaza? The lights are cooler there." Luke thought about the foot traffic, the chance of better tips, and the cost of a train ride. He also thought about the quiet spot under the tracks from last night, where there would be fewer people in daylight, fewer eyes. "I was thinking somewhere smaller," he said. "Quieter, just for a while." Mia squinted at him. "You are doing the thinking face." "This is just my face," he answered. "Finish breakfast." When they were done eating, Mia insisted on showing Zoe where the cups went, and which cabinet always stuck. Zoe listened as if it were a lesson that might be on a test later. Her hands moved quickly, used to doing tasks as soon as they were named. At the sink, Luke rinsed plates. When Zoe reached past him to put a fork in the drying rack, he saw the inside of her wrist. Faint bruises circled it, yellow and green at the edges. The pattern was too even to be from a fall. He kept his face still and turned back to the water. By early afternoon, they were back on the street. The sky was a pale sheet, the sun a smudge behind it. The city felt quieter than the night before. Holiday music still drifted from some storefronts, but there were fewer shoppers, more people walking dogs or hauling bags of trash to the curb. Luke chose a different corner near a bus stop with a shelter. The overhang would cut the wind a bit. A mural of abstract shapes and colors covered the brick wall behind them, bright under the gray sky. He set the piano in place, checked the pedals, then looked at Zoe. "You up for a science experiment?" he asked. She frowned faintly. "What kind of experiment? Music kind?" He flicked open the lid and sat down. His fingers rested on the keys, not moving yet. "I am going to play something," he said. "If you feel like joining in, you can. If you do not, you can tell me it stinks." Mia hopped up onto a nearby bench and tucked her hands into her pockets. She knew enough not to chatter when his tone shifted that way. Luke closed his eyes and pictured a stage he had stood on once years ago. Warm lights, crisp air, and a small side room where he had first heard a young woman playing a lullaby she had written for an infant daughter. The melody had lodged in his mind and never left, even when most other things from that time blurred. He began with those three high notes, the ones that sounded like a question. They rang out into the cold, thin, and clear. Zoe, standing near the corner of the piano, went still. The noise of the street seemed to thin around her. A bus hissed to a stop at the curb, its brakes squealing. The door folded open. No one got off. Luke moved into the next line. The melody descended, then rose again exactly as it had the night before, but slower now, leaving more space between phrases. In that space, something shifted. Zoe's fingers twitched at her sides. She looked down at her hands as if they had betrayed her. Her throat worked. Her breathing shortened. He kept playing. The second time the pattern came around, Zoe stepped closer. Without quite seeming to decide to do it, she put her hand on the keys at the upper end of the piano. When the music reached the place where the second voice was meant to come, and her fingers pressed down, the answering phrase poured out sure and unbroken. It did not sound careful. It did not sound like guessing. It sounded like memory. Mia's mouth dropped open. She looked from Zoe to her father, back to Zoe. Luke did not stop. He let the lullaby unfold between them, trading lines, letting Zoe carry more of it each time. Her shoulders relaxed by degrees. The tightness around her mouth eased. Her hands, small and chapped, moved with a fluency that had nothing to do with the girl in the hoodie, and everything to do with the ghost of a living room she could not quite see. When the song ended, there was a moment of quiet that felt deeper than the usual gap between tunes. A bus pulled away. Somewhere nearby, a car horn blared. A man with a grocery bag walked past and dropped a single crumpled bill into the mug without looking at them. Zoe stared at the keys. "I know that song," she said, more to herself than to Luke. "Yeah," he said softly. "I noticed." She swallowed. "My mom used to hum something when I was small. I do not remember the words, just the feeling. I did not know it was real." He studied her profile for a moment, the way her jaw clenched around that last word. "It sounds pretty real from here," he said. Across town, in a building of glass and steel, Evelyn Hart sat at a long conference table with a view of the frozen river. Her laptop was open in front of her, a slide deck half finished on the screen. A red notification icon blinked on her phone beside it. Her assistant had sent a message. It read only, "You need to see this." A link sat below the text. Voices droned around the table. Someone was talking about quarterly projections. Someone else was asking if they should delay an announcement until after the holidays. Evelyn tapped the link. A video filled the phone's screen. It had the vertical frame of a quick social clip. The caption read, "Found the actual spirit of Christmas outside the red line." The sound came first. A piano in the snow, a child singing wailed carols over bad speakers, and tinny recordings all week long. This sounded nothing like that. It sounded warm. It sounded like home. The camera steadied on a man in a worn coat, and a girl perched on a crate belting out the chorus of Silent Night, as if she meant every word. People passed in and out of frame, some dropping money into a mug. Near the edge of the screen, almost an afterthought, a small figure hovered, blonde hair escaping a hood, a thin hand reaching toward the keys. For a few seconds, the camera caught the angle of her face and profile, the point of her chin, the slope of her cheek. Evelyn's heart climbed into her throat. She pinched the screen to zoom in. The image broke into pixels, but she could still see some details. The way the child tilted her head when the pianist shifted into another song. The way her fingers flexed in midair before she touched the instrument. The flash of a familiar silver chain at her throat. On instinct, Evelyn opened the photo app and pulled up an old video saved in a folder she did not open often. A 3-year-old girl in polka dot pajamas sat at a glossy grand piano. Small hands patted the keys while an adult voice behind the camera laughed softly and guided her wrists. The toddler tilted her head toward the sound, listening harder than most children that age ever did. She tried again. This time, the notes formed the first clumsy hint of a melody. Evelyn set the two images side by side. One was crisp and bright, sight recorded in a warm nursery, with a lamp shaped like a cloud in the corner. The other was grainy and gray, captured in the harsh light of a city street. The head tilt was the same. The way the fingers curled above the keys was the same. Her throat went dry. "Ms. Hart," one of the board members was saying, "do you have thoughts on the revised timeline?" She did not look up. "Excuse me," Evelyn said. "I need 10 minutes." She stood, ignoring the murmur that followed, and walked out of the glass room with her phone clutched tight in her hand. Evelyn did not stop walking until the glass walls of the conference room were behind her and the hallway swallowed the low murmur of voices. Her office sat at the far end of the floor. The lights came on automatically when she opened the door. Clean lines, pale wood, a view straight down to the frozen river where a few stubborn patches of ice clung to the edges. She shut the door with more force than she meant to, then caught herself and took a breath. The video still glowed on her phone. The frame was paused on the moment the little blonde girl reached toward the piano. A grainy band of silver showed at her throat. Evelyn tapped a number from memory. "Mark Keller," a voice answered. "Talk to me." "It is Evelyn," she said. Her own voice sounded steadier than she felt. "I forwarded you a link. I need everything you can pull from that video." There was a small rustle on the other end, the sound of a chair tipping back. "You mean the TikTok?" "Yes." "All right, I can look at metadata, see if the poster left it public, maybe grab a location tag. But Evelyn, we have been through a lot of these clips. Kids at playgrounds, kids at malls. I know this is different every time for you, but you hired me to be the degree of separation." "I know who I hired," she said, "and I know what I'm asking. Just look at it." Another pause, a sigh this time. "I will call you back," Mark said. "Give me an hour." She hung up and lowered herself into the chair behind her desk. Her hand shook once when she set the phone down. She pressed her palm flat against the smooth surface to stop it. The city beyond the glass glittered under a thin winter sun. Cars crawled along the bridge. Tiny dark figures crossed the riverwalk, bundled against the cold. In the reflection on the window, she could see her own face pale and drawn, and behind it the ghost of the paused video still floating on her phone screen. She picked the phone up again and opened the old nursery clip. The tiny girl at the grand piano laughed silently, cheeks round with baby-fat hair, a brighter blonde than the child on the street. When she tilted her head toward the sound, Evelyn felt something in her chest clench. She had watched this clip so many times that every frame had worn a groove into her mind. Today, for the first time, there was another image to set against it. The same tilt, the same way the right hand hovered above the keys for half a second before landing. Outside the office, someone walked past. High heels clicked on polished floor. Distantly, an elevator binged. The world continued to behave as if spreadsheets and timelines were still important. Her phone buzzed in her hand. Mark faster than promised. "I pulled the file," he said without preamble. "The user who posted is local. Looks like a college kid. She tagged the Red Line and State Street. Timestamp is last night. Can you see anything else?" I grabbed a few frames and enhanced them. Do not get your hopes up because of that word. Enhanced still means blurry, just slightly less blurry. He hesitated. "But, yeah, the kid looks a lot like your photos. The age tracks, 8, maybe 9. Evelyn closed her eyes for a beat. "What about the man at the piano?" she asked. "Ran his face through public records," Mark said. "A name is Luke Ramirez. 36, born in Indiana, grew up between there and the South Side. No priors. Worked as a music teacher for a while, then at a club, then construction. Married a woman named Hannah 4 years back. She died of leukemia 2 years later. Big pile of medical debt in his trail. A daughter, 7, Mia." Mark stopped, letting the facts rest. "Anything else?" Evelyn asked. "Landlord says he pays his rent on time in cash, when he can payment plan, when he cannot. No complaints from neighbors. He picks up an extra shift moving furniture when people need it. His building manager said, and I quote, 'He is a good one.'" The words landed in the space between them. "And the girl," Evelyn said. "Zoe." "That is the thing," Mark replied. "There is no record, no foster file, no school file, no birth certificate I can tie to her. I looked for a match with your case too. Nothing concrete, just possibility." Possibility. The word tasted bitter and bright at the same time. "Where is he now?" she asked. "This Luke. He was at a different corner this afternoon," Mark said. "Near a bus stop about 10 blocks from last night. I have someone on our team sitting on a bench pretending to read. The girl is with them. She looks cold. She looks like every kid I have seen in shelters and on the streets. She also plays the piano like she was born doing it." Evelyn rose from her chair without realizing she had moved. "I want the exact address," she said. "Text it to me. I am going down there." "That is not wise," Mark said at once. "We usually talk to street musicians through a third party first. We let the police handle potential snatches. We do not stick your face into unpredictable situations with people we know nothing about." "I know enough," she said. "Send me the address." He hesitated and then gave up. "Fine, I am texting. Do not go alone." She ended the call and stood for a moment with the phone in her hand, breathing. Her reflection looked back from the window, now smaller against the city beyond. A ripple of fear moved through her. What if she was wrong again? What if she walked up to that piano and looked into those eyes and found nothing at all? She closed her fist around the phone until her knuckles paled. On the street under that pale sky, Luke let the last soft notes of the lullaby fade. Zoe stepped back from the keys as if she had touched something hot. Her lungs worked a little too fast. A patch of color had risen in her cheeks. "That is enough experiment for now," Luke said quietly. "Mia, you want to pick the next one?" Mia slid off the bench where she had been sitting. Her eyes were still wide. She looked as if she wanted to ask 400 questions and knew none of them would land right. She said. "Maybe something happy, like actually happy." "Scientifically happy," Luke said. He pivoted into a bouncy tune from a cartoon soundtrack. Nothing heavy, nothing that dragged. People dropped a few coins. One kid put in a handful of loose change his mother had just given him for a vending machine. The mug filled slowly. By the time their fingers went numb, Luke packed up the piano again. He wrapped the cover around it and strapped it securely to the dolly. On the walk to the train, they passed a police car parked nose out from a side street. An officer leaned on the hood writing on a notepad. Zoe saw the badge from half a block away. Her body reacted before anything else did. Her shoulders shot up. Her hand tightened on the strap of her backpack until the knuckles were white. Mia kept talking about a squirrel she had seen in the alley that morning. She did not seem to notice. Luke did. He felt the way Zoe shifted subtle at first, putting a little more distance between herself and the street. Her gaze dropped to the sidewalk. When the officer glanced their way, her chin tipped down further as if hiding inside the hood might make her invisible. "Keep close," Luke said to both girls, as if it were only about traffic. Once they passed the patrol car, he saw Zoe exhale slow and shaky, like someone stepping out of the shadow of something large. On the train, they found 3 seats in a row. The car rocked gently as it lurched forward. Lights flickered once in the tunnel. Mia pressed her nose to the window and traced a heart in the fog of her breath. Zoe sat very straight, backpack on her lap. Each time the train slowed and the intercom crackled, she tensed. When an official announcement mentioned delays and police activity at another station, she flinched at the word. Luke watched the muscles jump in her jaw. He thought about the bruise around her wrist, the way she had answered about where she slept, the familiarity with the lullaby that had no business belonging to a child drifting between city corners. Back in the apartment, the afternoon sank into a gray quiet. Mia settled on the floor with markers and a stack of stapled paper, drawing a comic about a superhero raccoon. Zoe sat near the couch, backpack at her feet, fingers worrying the edge of the strap. Luke stood in the kitchen staring at a magnet on the fridge. It held a faded business card against the metal. City of Chicago, Department of Children and Family Services. A neighbor had pressed the card into his hand months ago after seeing a boy left alone in the stairwell for too long. "If you ever see something," the neighbor had said, "if you ever cannot handle something." He peeled the magnet up and took the card down. The number blurred slightly as his mind filled every possible version of what might happen if he called. A caseworker would come. They would ask questions he did not know how to answer. Zoe might clam up or run. She might be placed somewhere worse than whatever she had run from. Or he could do nothing, and she would stay a ghost in the cracks of the city, relying on strangers and chance. In the living room, Mia cleared her throat. "Dad," she said, "are you thinking face again?" He looked over his shoulder. She was watching him, marker paused above the page. Zoe followed her gaze to the card in his hand. For a split second, fear flashed so bright across her face that it made him feel as if he had dropped something glass. He slipped the card into a drawer and closed it. "Just thinking about work schedules," he said, "and about what to make for dinner that is not noodles again." Mia accepted this. She bent back over her drawing. Zoe did not. "You are not calling anyone about me," she said. It was not a question. It sounded like a line she had repeated in other rooms to other adults. Luke met her eyes. "Not tonight," he said. She held his gaze another second, then nodded as if that were the most she could expect. On the other side of the city at street level, a different pair of eyes tracked a different set of details. Ray leaned against the brick wall near the entrance of a discount clothing store. His hands were shoved into the pockets of a thin jacket. A cigarette burned low between his fingers. To his left, at the base of a light pole, a poster flapped in the weak wind. The colors were dull from weather. A little girl's face smiled out from the center, younger, rounder eyes bright. Beneath the picture, the block letters offered a reward for information. The number below those words was large enough to make anyone pause. Ray had seen the posters around town for years. They blended into the background after a while. Today, one detail stuck: the sketch of a necklace around the girl's neck. A small pendant, oval and bright. He remembered the flash of silver he had seen earlier in the day, when a skinny kid in a gray hoodie had walked past with a man hauling a piano. The hoodie had shifted. The pendant had caught the light. He took a drag on the cigarette, then flicked ash toward the curb. "You see this?" he said to the shorter man beside him. The man Deke squinted at the poster. "Yeah, missing kid. Seen it. Look at the chain." Deke leaned closer, his lip curled. "You think it is her?" Ray let his gaze travel down the street to where the tracks rose up over the avenue and the corner where the piano man sometimes worked. "I think there is a reason a street kid wears jewelry like that," he said. "And I think some people are willing to pay to ask questions." The third man in their little cluster, Cole, cracked his knuckles. "Easy money," he said. Ray smiled without humor. "Nothing is easy," he said, "but some things are worth more effort than others." He tapped the poster once, then turned his attention toward the place where tomorrow he expected to see a small figure in a gray hoodie, a silver chain catching the light. By the next day, the apartment had begun to rearrange itself around the fact that there were 3 of them instead of 2. Zoe folded the blanket on the lower bunk as soon as she woke, smoothing out every wrinkle with the flat of her hands. She lined her shoes up beside Mia's under the bed toes touching the wall. Her backpack went in the exact same spot as the night before, within reach, but not in anyone's way. When Luke stepped out of the tiny bathroom, rubbing a towel over his hair, he nearly tripped on a pile of comic pages spread across the living room floor. "Careful," Maya said. She was kneeling at the coffee table, stapling 2 pages together. "Issue 2 is in production." Zoe sat cross-legged on the rug, sorting markers by color. Each time Mia set a finished page aside, Zoe slid it into a neat pile. Luke took in the scene. The couch pulled out, then pushed back again. The extra toothbrush on the sink, the second cup on the counter. "Any requests for breakfast from the creative department?" he asked. "Pancakes," Mia said immediately. "We had pancakes yesterday," he reminded her. "Exactly," she said. "It is a tradition now." "Oh, it definitely been now." He glanced at Zoe. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and kept her eyes on the markers. "Pancakes are good," she said. For a moment, the normalcy of that sentence hit him harder than any thanks could have. They were down to the last of the mix, so he added extra water and stretched it. The pancakes came out thin and a little uneven, but the syrup made up for most of it. They ate at the small table knees, almost touching. Mia narrated the origin story of her raccoon superhero between bites. "He is called Captain Trash," she said. "He does not fly, but he can climb really high, and he knows all the best hiding places." Zoe's mouth curled. "That is a terrible name," she said. "It is accurate," Mia replied. "He lives in a dumpster." Luke let them argue about raccoon branding, while he watched the way Zoe reached for the last pancake, and then pulled her hand back, leaving it on the plate. He nudged it toward her with his fork. "Eat," he said. "Captain Trash will not mind." She hesitated, then took it. Outside, the sky had turned the color of old paper. The streets were slushy from yesterday's snow melting and freezing again. The city felt exhausted from its own celebrations. Luke worked a midday shift at a warehouse 2 bus rides away. Normally, he would have left Mia with Mrs. Jenkins in the coffee shop for a few hours. Today, he did the same, but with an extra set of instructions. "You 2 stay inside unless the building is on fire," he told them. "If anyone asks questions you do not like, you call me or you tell Mrs. Jenkins. No wandering, no alley adventures." "Got it," Mia said. "No fire unless it is an emergency." Zoe stood with her hands shoved into the pockets of her hoodie. "What if you do not come back?" she asked. She said it with a flatness that turned it into something worse than a joke. "I will," he said. "People say that." He thought of hospital rooms and promises he had whispered to a woman who could no longer hold him to them. "I will," he repeated. "If the trains break, I will walk. If the sky falls, I will find a way around it." She studied his face, looking for cracks. When she did not see any, she gave a small nod, as if entering into a contract she did not entirely trust. In the coffee shop, the air was thick with the smell of espresso and cinnamon. Mrs. Jenkins greeted them with a towel thrown over one shoulder and a pencil stuck behind her ear. "Look at you 2, she said. "My afternoon shift just got cuter." She handed Mia a stack of napkins to fold and gave Zoe the job of wiping down the empty tables. Zoe worked carefully, circling crumbs with the damp cloth, never turning her back fully to the door. From time to time, Mrs. Jenkins glanced at her with a look that was not quite curiosity and not quite pity. At the warehouse, Luke spent 4 hours lifting, stacking, scanning. Pallets of holiday returns loomed around him. The repetitive work did what it always did. It kept his hands busy and left his mind free to roam. He kept circling back to the sound of Zoe's playing, to the way she had pulled back from the piano afterward as if she had touched something that might burn. He loaded another box onto a cart and knew with the kind of reluctant clarity that had nothing to do with logic that the lullaby connected her to someone. Somewhere in the city there was a missing piece that sounded like the first three notes of that song. In a different part of town, on a different floor of glass and steel, Evelyn stood at her office window and watched clouds slide over the river. Mark had sent her updates throughout the day. A grainy clip of Zoe playing in the afternoon, a zoomed-in still frame of the pendant at her throat, an oval shape catching a streak of winter light. It was not sharp enough to read any letters, but the outline was right. He had also sent a file on Luke that was more detailed than the quick summary over the phone. A copy of a performance review from an old music school job. A note from a landlord, handwritten, scanned in, calling him reliable if tired. Evelyn read the lines twice, 3 times. Her assistant knocked once and poked her head in. "Your car is ready, Ms. Hart," she said, "if you are still planning to go downtown." "I am," Evelyn said. To see." She picked up her coat from the back of the chair. The wool was heavy on her shoulders. Her hand found the small velvet box in her pocket. She did not open it. She did not have to. She knew exactly what sat inside. On the elevator ride down, she watched her reflection in the brass trim, the set of her mouth, the way she had begun to look more like the photographs of her own mother than she wanted to admit. Outside, the driver opened the rear door of the glossy sedan. "Same address as earlier?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "Near the red line, under the tracks." Back on the south side, the train carried Luke back to his station, with the rhythm he knew by heart. He resisted the urge to sprint up the steps. At street level, the sky had dimmed to the color of steel wool. He could see the glow from the coffee shop half a block away. Inside, Mia had built a small city out of sugar packets. Zoe leaned on the counter watching a latte machine hiss. When Luke pushed the door open, the bell chimed. Both girls turned. "You are late," Mia said. "I was going to eat your share of the muffins." "There are no muffins," Mrs. Jenkins said. "I do not bake on weekdays." "Mentally," Mia added. "Mentally, I was going to eat them." Zoe did not say anything. She just stepped away from the counter and stood where he could see her clearly, as if proving she was still there. He held her gaze for a second and gave a small nod. "How about we pay the piano some overtime?" he said. "Evening crowd might be generous." On the walk toward the busier part of downtown, the air felt heavier. More cars, more people. Street vendors had returned to the corners with carts of hot dogs and pretzels. The big tree in the plaza glowed with hundreds of white bulbs, every branch strung with lights. "Can we go near the tree?" Mia asked. "Please, people are in a good mood near trees." He considered the crowd, the open space, the chance of more money dropped into the mug. Then he thought of Zoe, who had fallen quiet as they moved closer to the thickening stream of bodies. "We will set up where we can see it," he said. "Not right under it." They found a corner at the edge of the plaza, near a lamppost wrapped in garlands. From here, the tree was visible, but not looming. Shoppers drifted past with bags, cheeks pink from the cold. Luke rolled the piano into place and flexed his fingers. Mia claimed her usual crate. Zoe stood at the side of the piano, close enough to touch it, far enough that she could step back if she wanted. He started with something simple and bright. Jingle bells, with a little swing in it. The sound carried over the hum of traffic and the chatter from the plaza. A child in a stroller clapped along, mittened hands bumping together. Bills landed in the mug. Coins clinked. The cold bit into the skin of his face, but his fingers found their rhythm. That was when a shadow detached itself from the flow of pedestrians and slowed near the edge of the circle. Ray walked with his hands in his pockets, head down, as if just another man cutting across the plaza. Deke and Cole drifted a few paces behind, looking at nothing and everything. He stopped a little closer than most people did, listening. When the song ended, he lingered, the small pause stretched out. "Nice playing," he said. Luke looked up. The man had a face that gave away little, a thin scar near his jaw, eyes that held no particular expression and yet seemed too focused. "Thanks," Luke said. "You are out here most nights?" Ray asked, as if making conversation. "Depends," Luke said. "Schedules change." Ray's gaze slid from Luke to Mia, then to Zoe. It rested on the necklace at Zoe's throat for a fraction too long, before he went back to Luke's face. "She yours too?" Ray asked. Luke straightened on the bench. "She is with us," he said. "That is not what I asked." Mia glanced between them, sensing the new temperature in the air. Zoe went still the way she had near the police car, but this time the fear had a sharper edge. Luke let his hands rest on the keys again, not playing yet, just grounding himself. "You got a problem with music on a public sidewalk?" he asked. Ray smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "No problem," he said. "Just curious. Street is rough on little kids. You see one out here with a shiny chain, you wonder if somebody is watching her. I am watching her, Luke said. The space between words tightened. For a moment, the sounds of the plaza seemed to fall away. The lights on the big tree blinked in their pattern. Somewhere behind them, a vendor shouted about roasted chestnuts. Ray lifted his hands in a small show of surrender. Relax, he said. We are all just citizens browsing the holiday atmosphere. Good song, man. You got a fan club. He jerked his chin toward the passing crowd and stepped back, merging into it again. Deke and Cole went with him, their heads bent close in quiet conversation. Mia leaned in toward Luke. I do not like him, she whispered. Neither do I, Luke said under his breath. Stay close. On the other side of the plaza, a black sedan eased along the curb, slowed and pulled into a spot. The driver cut the engine. Inside, Evelyn Hart sat with her hands folded over the velvet box in her lap, looking through the windshield at the glow of the tree and the small shape of a piano under the nearest lamppost. From the back seat of the sedan, the plaza looked almost unreal. The giant tree rose out of the stone like something transplanted from a different world, every branch wrapped in small white bulbs. Strings of lights hung between lampposts. A street vendor worked a cart near the curb, steam curling from metal lids. People moved in loose lines, their faces lit from below by phone screens and from above by the glow of decorations. Evelyn searched past all of that until she found the piano. It sat under a lamppost at the edge of the plaza. The man she now knew as Luke leaned into the keys. His shoulders were hunched against the cold. The little girl from the video perched on a crate at his side, swinging her legs. Between them stood a slighter figure in a gray hoodie, close enough to touch the piano, but a little apart, as if ready to back away at any moment. Evelyn's hand tightened on the velvet box. Do you want me to circle the block? The driver asked. No, she said. Park. The driver had already parked. It gave her something to say while she made herself breathe. She watched the three of them through the glass. Luke played something fast and cheerful. The girl on the crate clapped along. The hooded child watched his hands the way she had and the clip eyes tracking every movement. Evelyn opened the velvet box with her thumb. Nestled inside on a bed of dark fabric lay a small silver pendant on a fine chain, oval with a faint engraving at the center. The metal had been polished so many times that the edges had softened, but the letters were still clear. She closed the box just as quickly and let it sit on her palm. Across the plaza, Luke brought the song to a bright finish. A few people applauded. Someone whistled. A man in a heavy coat pushed forward to drop a bill into the mug. The hooded girl flinched when his arm brushed the air near her shoulder. Evelyn exhaled and reached for the door handle. Stay here, she told the driver. If I need you, I will call. The cold hit her in the face as soon as she stepped out. It was sharper here than 30 floors up. It carried the smell of roasted nuts and exhaust and wet wool. Her breath rose in small white bursts. She crossed the street at the light and stepped onto the plaza's stone. Her heels clicked against the ground. She winced at the sound and slowed as if a quieter approach might somehow change the outcome. Near the cart, a group of teenagers laughed loudly, passing a paper tray of pretzels back and forth. A boy with a red scarf cut across her path without looking. She sidestepped him, eyes fixed on the piano. She was close enough now to hear the chatter between songs. I think my toes froze off, Mia announced from her crate. They are gone. You will have to carry me home. We will file a report with the proper authorities, Luke said. Missing toes last seen in this plaza. Zoe stood between them and the street hands deep in her pockets. Her face was turned toward Luke, but her eyes kept flicking over the crowd. Evelyn slowed again. She saw it in stages, the hair, the slope of the small shoulders, the way Zoe shifted her weight as if always ready to run. None of that made her heart pound the way one small detail did. When Luke pushed his sleeves up a little, the girl in the hoodie reached out with a swift, shy motion and took hold of the cuff, tugging it back down over his wrist as if she had done it 100 times for someone else. The gesture was so familiar that it pried something open in Evelyn's chest. She remembered a different hand doing the same thing years ago for a different person. A toddler tottering at her father's side in the kitchen, grabbing his sleeve to keep it away from the hot pan. The memory was sharp and bright and gone again in an instant. Evelyn stepped closer. She was halfway between her car and the piano when she heard the clatter. The food cart by the curb lurched. One of its wheels hit a patch of ice at the edge of the street. The vendor grabbed for the handle, but a man bumping into the side threw off his balance. The cart shuddered and tipped. Lids banged open. Hot chocolate sloshed. A cloud of steam and the sharp smell of burned sugar burst into the air. People shouted. Someone cursed. A child screamed as a wave of warm liquid splashed near her boots. The vendor yelled for everyone to give him space. Evelyn flinched at the sudden noise. Zoe did worse. The crash froze her for half a second. Then she jumped backward. Her gaze locked on the toppled cart and her posture changed in an instant. She shrank in on herself, shoulders tightening, head down. Mia twisted around on the crate. "It is okay," she started, but Zoe was already moving. She ducked behind the piano, slipping between the bench and the lamppost. One hand brushed the back of Luke's coat, then found the side of the instrument, as if anchoring herself. She pressed into the small triangle of space between the piano and the post, hiding her body from the street and the cart and the knot of people rushing toward the spill. "It is all right," Luke said over his shoulder. "Nobody is hurt." He did not raise his voice. He turned just enough to see her eyes wide and bright in the narrow space. "They just tipped it," he said. "The cart. Hear that kid crying? That is because she lost her hot chocolate, not her foot." The tension in Zoe's jaw did not ease. She kept her hand on the piano fingers, pressed flat to the wood. The plaza was a swirl of motion now. People stepped back from the spill. A woman tried to wipe hot liquid from her daughter's coat. The vendor knelt by the cart, checking his stock and swearing under his breath. In the middle of the small flood, a man slipped. His legs went out from under him. He grabbed the nearest person to steady himself. She stumbled. A shoulder bumped against another, and the jolt rippled outward. Evelyn found herself caught in the edge of it. Someone knocked her arm. Her phone slipped from her hand. It hit the pavement, skidded, and came to rest under the bench near a trash can. "Sorry," a stranger muttered, already moving on. Evelyn crouched to grab the phone, then stayed down for a moment, using the trash can as cover to catch her balance. From this lower angle, the plaza looked different. Legs instead of faces. Boots instead of eyes. The piano was partially blocked by the moving bodies. She rose again and scanned the space where Zoe had been. For a moment, all she could see was Luke and the dark top of the piano. Mia sat with her back to the crowd, looking at Zoe, somewhere behind the instrument. The gray hood did not appear. Evelyn's chest tightened. She moved faster now, weaving between shoppers. A man stepped into her path, pointing with frustration at the spilled cocoa that had splashed the bottom of his suit pants. She sidestepped him and kept going. When she reached the lamppost, she had to stop. There was no room to push closer without physically inserting herself into the small pocket that Luke and the girls had created. From here, the child in the hoodie was a suggestion rather than a clear shape. A shoe, a bit of denim, a flash of silver at a throat when she shifted and peered around the side of the piano. Evelyn's breath caught. The pendant was turned to the smooth back facing out. Even so, the size was right. The way it lay on the thin chest was right. She opened her mouth. A voice cut in near her ear. "You want to move back, lady?" someone said. "They are trying to clean this up." A security guard from the plaza, wearing a bright reflective vest, held up his hands to push the cluster of onlookers away from the spill. He gave her a polite but firm nod. Evelyn stepped back on reflex. By the time the crowd thinned and the security guard turned aside, the scene around the piano had shifted again. Mia was tugging her hat down over her ears. Luke was closing the lid of the instrument. "We are calling it," he said. "Too many flying beverages." Mia puffed out her cheeks. "We just got here." "My fingers are turning into frozen fish sticks," he replied, "and I prefer them not to snap off." He looked toward the bus stop at the edge of the plaza, already calculating the route home. Zoe edged out from behind the piano. Her hood was still up. The chain at her throat flashed once in the lamplight as she moved. Her eyes swept the plaza in quick, efficient passes as if tallying exits. For a second, she looked straight at Evelyn. Recognition sparked in both directions, not of faces but of posture, of something restless and wounded under the surface. Zoe dropped her gaze almost at once and stepped closer to Luke, the point of her shoulder touching his sleeve. Evelyn took one small step forward. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice came out thinner than she intended. It barely carried over the sounds of the plaza. There was no reason for any of them to hear her. Luke did. He turned his head just enough to see her standing near the edge of the circle of light, a woman in a dark coat, hair pulled back from a pale face. Heels wrong for this part of town. Someone who did not fit the usual profile of a passerby with small bills ready for the mug. Something in his expression changed. Every instinct that had kept him moving through the years, when everything else fell apart, stirred to life. The man by the poster, the way he had watched Zoe, the sudden chaos with the cart, the sedan idling at the curb with its tinted windows and polite driver. "Time to go," Luke said. He did not say it sharply, only firmly, the way he did when he wanted Mia to listen without arguing. Mia heard the tone and hopped off her crate, ready to help him with the cover. Zoe moved with them. She did not look back at Evelyn again. Evelyn stepped closer. "I need to talk to you," she said. "About her." Luke's hands stilled on the strap of the piano cover. He looked at Evelyn properly now. The quality of the coat, the careful makeup smudged a little by the wind, the concern in her eyes that was too deep to be passing interest. He also saw that Zoe had gone rigid as soon as the woman spoke. The small hand that had been resting lightly on the side of the piano now clutched the wood as if it were the only solid thing. "Sure," he said slowly. "Another time." He tugged the strap tight and tipped the piano back onto its wheels. Mia grabbed the crate. Zoe fell into step without needing to be told. Luke positioned himself so that his body was between them and the woman. "Have a good night," he said. He pushed the piano away from the lamppost and toward the street, moving slower than a man escaping and faster than a man who wanted to stay. Evelyn watched them cross toward the station entrance. Her hand went to her pocket, closing around the velvet box. She could still feel the shape of the pendant inside. Her throat ached. She pulled out her phone and dialed Mark as she walked back toward the car. "I saw them," she said when he answered. "I saw her." "Do you want me to get the police involved now?" he asked. "Not yet," she said. "Find out everywhere he has played in the last month. Every corner, every station, every plaza. I want camera footage. I want times. I want to know where he lives, where he buys groceries, where he takes his daughter when it snows." There was a beat of silence. "You think she is yours?" he said quietly. "I think," Evelyn said, "that I need to be sure. And I think that man is going to keep her close until someone proves they can take better care of her." Outside the train entrance, Luke paused on the top step and looked back over his shoulder. The tree glittered. The cart vendor mopped at the last of the spill. The black sedan waited at the curb. He turned away and guided the girls down into the station, one hand on the piano, the other free, in case either of them slipped. The next night, the city felt colder. The snow that had melted into dirty slush had frozen again, hard and uneven underfoot. Breath hung heavier in the air. The train screeched a little louder on the curbs. Luke shifted the weight of the piano on the dolly and checked the straps one more time. "You sure about going out?" Mrs. Jenkins asked from the doorway of the coffee shop. Warmth and the smell of baked bread spilled out behind her. "Rent is still due," he said. "Holidays do not argue with landlords." Mia pulled her hat down over her ears until it nearly covered her eyes. "We have an extra musician now," she said. "We are unstoppable." Zoe stood a step behind them, hands deep in her pockets. Her hood was up. Only the tip of her nose and the line of her mouth showed. Luke looked at both girls. "Same rules," he said. "You stay where I can see you. If anything feels wrong, you tell me right away, even if you are not sure why." Mia nodded. Zoe did not, but he saw the way her shoulders tightened with attention. They walked toward the corner under the tracks. The lamppost they usually claimed buzzed faintly when the light flickered on. Overhead, a train rumbled past, sending a small rain of loose snow down from the metal. Luke set the piano in its place. The bricks here knew him. The cold did too. His fingers found their way across the keys as if the instrument had always belonged to this patch of sidewalk. He started with something safe. Joy to the World with a little bounce. Mia clapped along. Zoe hovered at the side close, but not quite touching the piano. Across the street in the dim space between two parked cars, Ray watched. He had his hands buried in the pockets of a thicker jacket tonight. Deke and Cole stood with him, backs to a storefront, as if they were deciding whether to go in. "There," Deke said under his breath. "Same girl, same chain." Zoe shifted, and the silver pendant flashed as it caught a smear of light. Ray had spent part of the day walking, following the lines of the elevated tracks, getting a feel for the places where people stopped and where they did not. He had passed 3 more of the reward posters. The number at the bottom did not seem to be shrinking. "Somebody is still paying to look," he said. Cole sniffed, breath white in the air. "So we sell," Cole said. "We call some tip line, say we saw her get the cash." Ray shook his head. "You have lived in this town long enough to know better," he said. "Tip money is nothing compared to what people will pay not to have the police involved. You bring a rich family their lost piece, you name your price." He watched Luke bend toward the piano to murmur something to the girls. The man had a tired way of moving that suggested good intentions and bad luck. "Besides," Ray added, "you think they listen to us if we call. They hear the voice, they hear where the call is from. First thing they do is bring uniforms, not checks." Cole grunted. "So what is the plan?" Ray smiled slightly. "We get closer," he said. "We find out how much the man cares about the girl. We find out how close the money is. Then we decide." A dark sedan rolled to a stop at the end of the block. It did not look like the cars that usually parked here. Cleaner, newer. The engine purred instead of rattled. Ray's attention flicked to it, then back to the piano. "Looks like somebody else already decided she is worth something," he said. At the corner, Luke launched into another song. His fingers knew the territory. It let his eyes scan the street. A habit from his childhood with a father who never sat with his back to any door. He saw the sedan, the way it idled instead of pulling away. He saw 3 men across the street watching with too much focus for casual passers-by. The hair on his arms lifted. Mia did not notice. She was trying to whistle along with the chorus. Zoe noticed. He felt more than saw the way her body leaned closer to the piano, as if its bulk could shield her from whatever she had already learned to expect from guys who stared too long. "Break," he said quietly at the end of the song. Mia pouted. "Already. We hydrate, we breathe, then we go again," he replied. He flexed his fingers and stepped away from the keys. Ray chose that moment to cross the street. He did not come straight at them. He wandered toward the piano, as if drawn by the sound, hands still in his pockets, head tipped, like someone listening. "Good stuff," he said when he reached the edge of their space. "You ever play inside man clubs, lounges, anything with walls?" Luke met his eyes briefly. "Used to," he said. "Crowd is better out here." Ray chuckled. It did not sound amused. "Yeah," he said. "People appreciate things more when they think they are doing charity." He let his gaze drop to the mug, then to Mia, then to Zoe. Up close, the pendant was easier to see. The silver had dulled on the edges, but the shape was precise. An oval, a faint line of engraving at the center. "She yours?" Ray asked. "Bull. "She is with us," Luke said. Luke said. "Is that what you told her folks?" Ray said. "If she has any." Zoe's hand locked on the edge of the piano. Her eyes flickered once toward Luke, then away. Luke shifted his body just enough to put more of himself between the man and the girls. "You got a question, ask it," Luke said. "Do not circle it." Ray nodded, as if he appreciated the directness. "Word is there is a reward for a kid," he said. "Little girl disappeared a while back. Posters all over town. Real nice necklace in the picture, kinda looks like that one." His attention cut to Zoe's throat. "You figure a street kid with hardware like that has somebody who wants her found," Ray added. "Or somebody who will pay a lot to keep other folks from finding her." Mia looked from one adult face to the other, trying to track the conversation, and not liking what she caught. Zoe swallowed. Her fingers tightened. She did not reach for the pendant. She kept her hand where it was clamped to the wood. Behind them, the sedan's door opened. Evelyn stepped out, cold air hitting her cheeks like a slap. She saw the knot of bodies around the piano, the set of Luke's shoulders, the way the man in front of him stood too close. Every cell in her body screamed at her in a run toward them. She stayed where she was, long enough to pull out her phone and dial 3 numbers. 911, what is your emergency? The operator said. She watched the corner as she spoke low and fast, giving the intersection describing the scene. Her voice shook once. She swallowed it down. On the sidewalk, Luke heard a faint siren in the distance. Chicago swallowed noises like that, but he had developed an ear for which ones kept going and which ones were coming closer. "You thinking of collecting that reward yourself?" he asked Ray. Ray smiled, teeth barely showing. "I am thinking about opportunities," he said. "You could use one from the looks of it." He took a half step forward. The move was small. It still shortened the distance more than Luke liked. Behind him, Deke and Cole had drifted closer, one on each side, just outside arm's reach. "I told you last night," Luke said. "She is under my watch." "And I told you," Ray said, "that is not always enough." The siren grew louder. It turned a corner somewhere out of sight, the pitch shifting as the vehicle moved. Ray's expression flickered. For a second, annoyance cut through the neutral mask. He shifted his weight back. "Relax," he said, voice softer. "Nobody is taking anything tonight. We are all just talking." He lifted his hands as if to show he came with nothing. A patrol car passed at the end of the block light, strobing silently. It kept moving, heading toward another call. Ray tracked it with his eyes, then looked back at Luke. "Street keeps secrets until it does not," he said. "Keep that in mind." He turned away, jerking his head for the others to follow. Deke muttered something as he went. Cole cracked his knuckles and smiled at Zoe, the kind of smile that promised he would remember her face. They disappeared into the dark around the corner. The silence they left behind felt heavy. Mia stepped closer to Luke without realizing it. Zoe did realize it. She moved so that her shoulder brushed his arm. "You all right?" he asked them. Mia nodded too fast. "Who were they?" she asked. "Someone else's problem," he said, "and not our responsibility to solve." He wanted to pack up right then. There was money to be made, but there were also men who knew too much now. He had just wrapped his fingers around the mug when a woman's voice reached them. "Please," she said. "Just a moment." He turned. Evelyn stood near the edge of the light, close enough that he could see the tension in her jaw. Her coat looked thin for this wind. Her eyes were fixed on Zoe, not on him. Zoe felt that gaze like a physical touch. She took a small step back, bumping into the piano. Luke shifted again out of habit. "We are done for the night," he said. "Whatever you are selling, we are not buying." "I am not selling anything," Evelyn said. Her voice was quiet, but there was a raw edge under the words. "I am trying to find my daughter." Mia's eyes widened. Luke's fingers tightened on the mug. Zoe went absolutely still. Evelyn took a breath that looked like it hurt. "I know how this sounds," she said. "A stranger in a nice coat saying things like that. I know how many people get it wrong. I know how much it hurts to believe them." She took a small step closer, hands visible at her sides. "I watched a video of her," Evelyn said. "Of all of you. Someone posted it online, and I saw the way she listened, the way she moved her hands when you played. I have watched my daughter do that since she was old enough to climb onto a piano bench." Luke said nothing. He could feel Zoe's gaze on him now, searching his face for what she should do. Evelyn did not look away from Zoe. "I do not want to scare you," she said. "I do not want to take anything from you that keeps you safe. I just need to know if you remember this." She stepped around the piano slow enough that Zoe could track every motion. When she was close enough to see the freckles at the bridge of the girl's nose, she stopped. Her hands rose, not reaching for Zoe, just hanging in the air between them. Then she hummed. The sound was fragile at first, breathy in the cold. 3 high notes spaced just so. A question. The first line of Starlight Lullaby slipped out into the space between the lamppost and the tracks. Zoe's eyes widened. The wind seemed to quiet for a second. The rattle of a train starting down the line turned into a distant echo. Evelyn moved into the next phrase, low and clear, the melody descending and rising again. Her voice shook on one note. She caught it and kept going. Zoe's mouth parted. She heard the music and something inside her shifted. Not a new feeling, an old one buried deep, a scent she could not name, a hand on her hair, a room filled with soft light, fingers guiding hers along cool keys, a laugh close to her ear. Her eyes filled without her permission. As the melody circled back to that first question, Zoe did something she had no plan for. She sang. The answering line came out thin and uncertain at first, then strengthened as the notes found the places they knew. Her voice matched Evelyn's on the rise, then slipped into the higher phrase that had always belonged to the child in the duet. Mia stared. Luke felt the ground tilt under his feet. Evelyn's lips trembled. She kept singing until the lullaby brought them both to the final lingering note. The sound faded. The city noises rushed back, in a car door slamming down the block, a dog barking somewhere, the buzz of a neon sign. Zoe was crying openly now. The tears cut cold tracks down her cheeks. She seemed to be seeing 2 things at once, the icy corner under the tracks and a different place layered over it, warm and safe. "I know that," she whispered. "I know that." Evelyn nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "I used to sing it to you," she said finally. "Every night, you would not sleep without it." Zoe looked up into her face. For the first time, she really studied the lines there. The shape of the eyes, the way the woman's mouth tightened when she tried not to cry, the same tilt of the chin she saw in the mirror when she wiped dirt from her own face. A memory surfaced sudden and sharp, a hand with a small scar near the thumb holding a cup of milk with a straw. A voice saying her name in that exact cadence. "Mom," Zoe breathed. The word was small, but it seemed to fill the whole corner. Evelyn let out a sound that was somewhere between a sob and a laugh. She dropped to her knees in the dirty snow without noticing the wet seeping into her tights. "Yes," she said. "Yes, baby, yes." She held her arms open without reaching forward. Zoe hesitated for half a heartbeat. The fear that had kept her alive on sidewalks and in doorways trembled inside her. Then another feeling rose older than the fear. She stepped forward and fell into Evelyn's arms. The impact knocked Evelyn back a little. She wrapped her arms around the thin body and held on, fingers digging into the fabric of the hoodie nose buried in the faint smell of cheap detergent and winter air. Zoe clutched at her coat, hands fisting in the wool. Her shoulders shook. She pressed her face into the hollow of Evelyn's neck as if trying to crawl into the space between collar and skin. "I looked for you," Evelyn said into her hair. "Every day. I never stopped." Zoe's answer drowned in the fabric. She tried again. "I thought you did not want me," she choked out. "They said you did not want me." Evelyn pulled back just enough to frame Zoe's face in her hands. "Listen to me," she said. "I have never stopped wanting you. Not for 1 second." Her thumbs brushed tears away. The pendant at Zoe's throat glinted between them. Evelyn's breath hitched when she saw it up close. The letters were there, worn but clear. ZH. On the back, she knew another initial weighted the one she had chosen when she had the pendants made. Behind them, Mia sniffed loudly. She swiped at her nose with the back of her glove. Luke stood very still, the piano at his back, the lamppost beside him. The sight in front of him made his throat ache. It was like watching something broken slide back into the place it had always been meant to fit. Evelyn pulled Zoe close again and did not seem inclined to let go. Over Zoe's shoulder, her eyes met Luke's. "Thank you," she mouthed. The words were silent, but he understood every one. The world around the small circle of light seemed to shrink. Cars still hissed along the wet street. People still moved through the cold. Somewhere a siren moaned in the distance. On the corner under the tracks, it all felt far away. Zoe clung to Evelyn's coat. Her fingers dug into the fabric as if she could anchor herself there. Evelyn held her just as tightly, cheek pressed to the top of Zoe's head. Mia edged closer until she was practically leaning against Luke. Her hand found his sleeve. "She found her," Mia whispered. "Dad, she really found her." Luke's throat was thick. He cleared it once. "Looks that way," he said. He watched the two of them. Watched the way Zoe fit into Evelyn's arms, how her thin shoulders seemed to flatten against the woman's chest, as if they had always known that shape. He had expected to feel only relief. Relief that Zoe had someone. Relief that he would not have to keep making decisions he was not qualified to make. What rose instead was a knot of emotions that did not separate so cleanly. Joy for Zoe, a quiet grief for what he was about to lose, something that felt like pride, sharp and tender. Across the street in the dark, cut between two buildings, eyes watched the reunion. Ray stood half in shadow breath, smoking in front of him. Deke shifted beside him, stamping his feet for warmth. Cole leaned against a brick wall, hands tucked deep into his pockets. "That is her," Deke said. "The rich one from the news. I have seen her face." On the posters, the woman's picture sometimes appeared beside the missing child's. Headlines had carried her name when the story first broke back before it turned into part of the background noise of the city. Evelyn Hart. Ray watched Zoe pull back just enough for Evelyn to cup her face. He saw the pendant glint between them. "So the kid is not just lost," he said. "She belongs to someone who can pay more than a reward poster." Deke wiped his nose with the back of his glove. "Could turn this whole thing in nice and legal," Cole said. "Get that money honest for once." Ray did not answer for a moment. On the corner, Evelyn rose from the snow, still holding Zoe's hand. She looked like a woman who had been cracked open and was standing only because she had not yet remembered how to fall. Luke stepped forward. "She needs to get warm," he said. His voice was gentle, but there was a firmness under it. "There are things you two should talk about that do not involve frostbite." Evelyn nodded, wiping at her cheeks with the back of her hand. She seemed to realize only now that she was kneeling in gray slush. Her tights were soaked through to the skin. "Yes," she said. "Yes, of course." She stroked Zoe's hair back from her face. "I have a car," she said. "We can sit inside for a minute. The driver can take us somewhere. A hospital, the house, wherever feels right." Zoe looked at Luke as if the decision depended on him. He should have told her to go. He knew it. He also knew what it felt like to walk out of a hospital room and leave something behind that you could not get back. "Car is close," he asked. "Half a block," Evelyn said. She pointed. The black sedan still idled where the driver had left it, exhaust curling from the tailpipe. Luke nodded slowly. "All right," he said. "We will walk you over." Mia squeezed his arm. "You mean all of us, right?" she asked. "We are not just letting her leave." "All of us," he said. They began to move together toward the car. Evelyn on one side of Zoe, Luke, and Mia on the other. The piano stayed behind, locked and strapped a dark block under the lamplight. In the shadows, Ray watched them turn the corner. "You still thinking tip line?" Cole asked. Ray shook his head. "They are walking her into a car with a driver," he said. "That is controlled. That is numbers and cameras and security teams." His gaze slid from the sedan to the mouth of the side street that emptied into the next block. "But they have to cross open ground to get there," he added. "They have to walk through dark like everybody else." He flicked his cigarette to the curb and ground it out under his heel. "Come on," he said. They cut down the alley parallel to the sidewalk. Snow crunched under their boots. The walls rose high on either side, bricks sweating a thin sheen of ice. At the far end, the alley opened near a side street where an old white van sat with its engine off. Ray slapped the metal twice as he passed. "Time to turn the key," he said. The driver, a man with tired eyes and a cheap jacket, leaned forward to twist the ignition. The engine coughed, then caught. On the main sidewalk, Zoe drew closer to Evelyn when they passed a cluster of strangers. Mia talked softly, filling the space with stories about the raccoon comic and the way Mrs. Jenkins sometimes gave them day-old muffins. Luke listened with half an ear. The rest of his attention stretched ahead and behind, mapping each movement around them. He did not see the van until it swung hard out of the side street. Its headlights were off. It glided through the first few feet of snow almost quietly, then jarred over a frozen rut. The sound made Luke's head snap toward it. The side door slid open before the van had fully stopped. Two shapes exploded out of the dark interior. Deke hit the sidewalk first, boots slipping a little on the icy patch, arms already reaching. Cole landed astride behind him. Both went straight for Zoe. It happened in a tangle of motion. 1 second, Zoe's hand was in Evelyn's. The next, rough hands tore her away. Evelyn stumbled, fingers clawing at air. The world tilted as she fell sideways into the snow. Zoe screamed. The sound ripped through the night, high and raw. It cut straight through Luke's chest. He lunged forward. Cole's arm clamped around Zoe's waist. Deke grabbed her legs. She kicked and twisted, nails raking skin where she could reach. Her heel connected with someone's shin. He swore and tightened his grip. Mia stood frozen, eyes wide, her hat sliding crooked on her head. "Run, Mia!" Luke heard himself shout. "To the coffee shop, now!" She jumped like she had been woken from a dream and bolted back the way they had come, boots sliding, arms pumping. Luke slammed into Deke hard enough to knock the breath out of both of them. His shoulder hit flesh and bone. They went down in a knot. The van idled inches away, side door gaping like a mouth. Cole yanked Zoe up, half lifting, half dragging her. Her hands clawed at the air. One grabbed his face, catching his eye. He shouted and flung her more roughly than he meant to, toward the open door. Luke drove an elbow into Deke's ribs and pushed himself up. His knees slid on the ice. He felt something in his side pull, a hot, sharp pain that flared and then dulled into a deep throb. He got to his feet in time to see Zoe's small body vanishing into the dark of the van. "No," he breathed. Evelyn was already scrambling up on her hands and knees, slipping in the snow. Her hair had come loose from its neat style, falling around her face. "Zoe," she cried. "Zoe, hold on." Ray stepped between her and the van, one hand pushing her back with surprising gentleness. "This is not your part," he said. She shoved at him with all her strength. It barely moved him. Luke did not think. He ran. The van began to roll. The driver had his foot half on the gas, half on the brake, torn between the plan and the reality of screaming and flailing limbs. Luke reached the side of the vehicle and grabbed the handle of the sliding door. The metal was cold enough to bite his palm. His feet skidded on the snow. For a sickening second, he was dragged along his boots, losing traction. Inside the van, Zoe saw him. She lunged toward the opening, fingers outstretched. One hand found his sleeve. He used the pull to haul himself up, feet leaving the ground, half climbing, half being dragged. His shoulder hit the frame. Pain shot down his arm. He clung to the door with one hand and reached into the van with the other. Cole swung at him. The punch caught Luke across the cheekbone. Light burst behind his eyes. He tasted blood. "Help me!" Zoe cried, trying to twist out of Cole's grip. In the street behind them, sirens grew louder, real this time, close. The sound bounced between the buildings, a rising wail. "Drive!" Ray shouted at the front. The driver floored it. The sudden jolt nearly tore Luke's fingers from the handle. Wind shoved at his face. The van barreled toward the intersection, tires spitting slush. Luke hooked his elbow over the edge of the open door and swung his upper body inside. For a heartbeat, he was half in, half out, one leg still dragging along the street. Cole grabbed for his arm again, aiming to shove him back out. Luke twisted, letting the momentum carry the man's hand past him. His own fist shot up, connecting with Cole's jaw. The man's head snapped back against the interior wall. Zoe used the moment. She lunged forward, throwing herself into Luke's chest. He nearly lost his grip on the door. He wrapped one arm tight around her, pinning her to him. The traffic light at the next corner turned red. The driver yanked the wheel and stomped the brake. The van skidded, fishtailing slightly. Tires squealed on ice. The sudden deceleration hurled Luke and Zoe forward. He had just enough time to curl his body around hers. His back slammed into the lip of the door. Stars burst across his vision. Air punched out of his lungs. For one suspended second, everything held. Then the world snapped back into motion. He felt the weight of Zoe in his arms, the strain in his shoulder, the door handle under his other hand. He let go. Gravity took them. They crashed out of the van, tumbling into the street. Luke hit first at the impact, cracking through his ribs. Pain flared so bright it almost erased the rest of the world. He held onto Zoe like she was the only thing that existed. They rolled. His elbow scraped pavement through the thin fabric of his coat. His head snapped against something hard. Then they were still half in snow, half on cold asphalt. The van lurched forward another few feet, then jerked to a stop as two patrol cars screamed into the intersection, from opposite directions, lights flashing red and blue. One swerved in front of the van, blocking its path. The other cut in behind. Doors flew open. "Hands where we can see them," a voice shouted. "Do not move." In the middle of the chaos, Luke lay on his back and tried to remember how to breathe. His chest burned. Each inhale felt like glass. Zoe curled against him, her small fingers knotted in his shirt. "Are you all right?" he managed. She nodded against his shoulder. Her voice came out as a squeak. "You are bleeding," she said. He followed her gaze. A warm trickle slid down from his hairline into his eye. When he blinked, the world smeared red for a second. "Just a scratch," he said. It hurt far more than a scratch, but he did not see any point in giving it the dignity of a better word. Boots pounded around them. Shouts layered over each other. "Out of the vehicle. Spread your legs. On the ground now." Someone wrenched Cole out of the van and shoved him down onto the hood of a squad car. Deke hit the pavement on his knees, hands laced behind his head. The driver went face first into a snowbank, an officer's knee in his back. Ray had vanished. Luke did not know when he had slipped away. The street was full of uniforms and flashing lights, and the angry shouts of men who had just seen a large sum of imagined money vanish. Evelyn stumbled into view, breathless hair wild. She dropped to her knees beside Luke and Zoe. "Are you hurt? Are you hurt anywhere?" she asked, hands hovering over Zoe as if afraid to press too hard. "I am okay," Zoe said. Her voice shook. He did not let go. Evelyn turned to Luke. "Thank you," she said, the words rough. "I do not know how many times I can say that in one lifetime." He tried to shrug and winced. "She bites hard," he said. "She did most of the work." Paramedics arrived with a stretcher. One of them knelt beside Luke, already reaching for gloves and gauze. "We need to check you out, sir," the medic said. "You took quite a ride." "I am fine," Luke started. Zoe's hand tightened on his. "Please go," she whispered. "Please just go." He looked at her, then at Mia standing on the sidewalk, a few feet away, eyes huge above the scarf someone had wrapped around her face. A neighbor from the coffee shop must have caught her, because Mrs. Jenkins hovered at her shoulder, one hand on the girl's back. Luke exhaled. "All right," he said, "but she rides with me." The medic hesitated. "Sir, she should stay with her legal guardian," he began. "She is not leaving my sight," Evelyn said, her voice calm and hard. "Not until we get to a place with 4 walls and a door. I am going with them." The medic looked between them and decided not to argue. Minutes later, Luke lay on a stretcher inside the ambulance, strapped more tightly than he liked. Zoe sat on the bench beside him, one of his hands trapped between both of hers. Evelyn sat on the other side, braced against the sway as the vehicle pulled away. Through the open back doors, just before they closed, he saw Mia. She stood in the wash of red and blue lights, clutching Mrs. Jenkins' arm, watching him go. Her face was pale, but when their eyes met, she lifted her free hand and curled her fingers into a small shaking wave. He raised his hand as far as the straps would let him, answering the gesture. The doors shut. The siren wailed again as the ambulance cut through the winter night, carrying them toward the kind of bright humming building where everything would be measured and named. The ambulance smelled like antiseptic and rubber. Luke stared at the metal ceiling as it rattled above him. Every bump sent a fresh spike of pain through his ribs. A strip of gauze pressed against the cut on his forehead. Dried blood itched at his hairline. Zoe still had his hand. She gripped it with both of hers, small fingers wrapped around his knuckles. Her sneakers swung a little with each turn the ambulance took. Evelyn sat rigid on the other bench, hands braced on her knees, watching every movement of the medics. "Sir, on a scale of 1 to 10, how is your pain?" one of them asked. Luke thought about it. 7, he said. 6 if we are grading on a curve. The medic gave him a look that said he was not helping. "We will get pictures of those ribs," she said. "You are probably going to be sore for a while." Zoe leaned over him, her hair falling forward. "He saved me," she told the medic, as if that changed the diagnosis. He held on when the car was moving. "I noticed," the medic said softly. At the hospital, fluorescent lights replaced the red and blue of the squad cars. The gurney rattled over thresholds and into a curtained bay. Nurses swooped in with practiced efficiency, checking vitals, hooking up monitors. Someone tried to steer Zoe toward a chair in the hall. "This is family only, sweetheart," the nurse said. Zoe dug her heels in. "He is my family," she said. Her voice had that flat edge again, the one that came when she expected a fight. "It is all right," Luke said before the words could harden into something worse. "She can stay. I do not bite." The nurse hesitated, then shrugged. "Fine," she said. "Tuck yourself in that corner and do not touch anything." Zoe dragged the chair as close to the bed as she could without tripping over cords. She sat with her knees pulled up, hands still within reach of Luke's. Evelyn handled the paperwork. At the intake desk, she gave her name. The woman on the other side of the counter blinked once, recognition flickering in her eyes, then smoothed it away in favor of professionalism. "We will need information for the child as well," the clerk said, fingers poised over the keyboard. "Name, date of birth, primary guardian." "Her name is Zoe Hart," Evelyn said. The words came out with a force that made the clerk's fingers pause. Primary guardian. The phrase hung between them. For 3 years it had been a blank space on every form that mattered. "I am her mother," Evelyn said. She kept her voice steady, though her throat tried to close around the words. "We can fill in the rest later." The clerk nodded, perhaps more gently than she would have for another patient. Back behind the curtain, a doctor in light blue scrubs studied Luke's scans on a monitor. "Good news," he said. "No fractures. You have some impressive bruising, and I would bet on a sprained shoulder. Concussion is mild, but you are going to have a headache that does not like you for a couple days." "That seems fair," Luke said. "Keep ice on the shoulder, take the pain meds I am prescribing, and no heavy lifting for at least a week," the doctor continued. "That includes pianos." Luke frowned. "Piano is kind of the point. Find a friend," the doctor said, "or use a smaller one." He moved on to the next patient, leaving the curtain swaying behind him. When the noise of the hospital shifted down a notch, Evelyn stepped inside. She had traded her soaked tights for a pair of sweats the nurse found somewhere. Her hair was pulled back in a quick knot. The exhaustion in her face could not blunt the light in her eyes. "How bad is it?" she asked. "I will live," Luke said. "They say I have to avoid lifting anything heavier than a sandwich for a while." Zoe huffed a tiny sound that might have been a laugh if it had more room. Evelyn came to stand on the other side of the bed. She looked at the bandage on his forehead, the bruise already darkening along his jaw. "I am so sorry," she said. "You did not throw me at the van," he replied. Her fingers curled against the rail of the bed. "I am the reason she was outside at all," she said. "My life, my choices, they pulled her into this. People saw a headline and decided she was worth money." Luke watched her for a second. "You are also the reason there were cops 2 blocks away," he said, "and the reason you were there to grab her when she ran." He shifted his gaze to Zoe. "How are you doing?" he asked. She shrugged one shoulder. "Tired," she said. "I thought it would feel different." "What would," he asked. "Finding her," Zoe said. She glanced at Evelyn. "Finding you." Evelyn swallowed. "Different how?" she asked quietly. "I do not know," Zoe said. "Louder, or like everything else would stop hurting." She rubbed at one wrist where the old bruise had begun to fade. Evelyn reached out and stopped just short of touching her. "Some things do not stop hurting," she said, "but they do not have to hurt alone." Zoe looked at her for a long moment, then leaned against her side, slow and deliberate. Evelyn wrapped an arm around her shoulders. A police officer appeared at the curtain. "Ms. Hart," he asked. Evelyn straightened. "Yes. We will need statements," he said. "From you, from Mr. Ramirez, from the older child, if she can manage a few questions. The men in the van are in custody. We are still looking for the third suspect." "Ray," Zoe said under her breath. Luke nodded. He was the one doing most of the talking. The officer scribbled the name down. "We will talk through it," he said. "Not tonight. Get some rest first." When he left, the small bubble of the hospital bed closed in around them again. Mia arrived an hour later, escorted by Mrs. Jenkins and a nurse with a clipboard. Her cheeks were red from the wind. Her hair stuck out from under her hat in wild curls. She stopped 2 feet from the bed. "You look terrible," she told Luke. "Honesty," he said, "my favorite daughter feature." She climbed carefully onto the edge of the mattress and hugged him as gently as she could manage. "I thought you were going to die," she whispered into his shoulder. "Not tonight," he said. "Too much paperwork." When she pulled back, she noticed Zoe tucked under Evelyn's arm. "You okay?" Mia asked. Zoe nodded. "They did not take me," she said. Mia looked at Evelyn, at the hand resting on Zoe's shoulder. "You are her mom," she said. It was not a question. "Yes," Evelyn said. "I am." Mia considered this for a moment, as if rearranging pieces in her head. "That is good," she said simply. Then after a beat, "You can still share her right." Evelyn's lips parted. She blinked hard once. "If Zoe wants that," she said, "then yes, I would like that very much." Mia seemed satisfied. She slid down to sit beside Zoe on the narrow bench, their shoulders bumping. Later, when Mia had been coaxed into going home with Mrs. Jenkins for the night, and Zoe had finally drifted to sleep in the chair, her hand still inside the rail of Luke's bed, Evelyn sat on the other chair and stared at the wall. The room hummed with soft machine noises. A monitor beeped at steady intervals. Somewhere down the hall, a child cried and a nurse crooned in response. "I should tell you what happened," Evelyn said quietly. Luke turned his head just enough to look at her. "You do not have to," he said. "I do," she replied. "If you are going to keep being part of this, you should know what you stepped into." The phrasing caught him. Keep being part of this. It pressed against something that had been forming at the back of his mind. She looked down at her hands. 3 years ago, she said, I stopped at a gas station off the highway with my daughter. We were driving back from my parents' place. I answered an email on my phone instead of watching her for exactly 2 minutes. Her voice did not tremble. It flattened each word chosen with care. When I looked up, she was gone, she said. There was a man on the security footage and a door, and then nothing. The police did what they could. I hired people like Mark to do more. We followed every tip. Every blonde girl in a crowd became a possibility, and then a disappointment. She smiled without humor. I learned how long you can live on the edge of hope without falling off, she said. It is not a skill I recommend. Luke watched Zoe's sleeping face. And now, he asked. Now she is here, Evelyn said. She remembers the lullaby. She remembers pieces of our life. There will be tests and lawyers and forms, but I know. In my bones I know. She looked up at him. And I know she would not be in that chair if you had not stopped on that sidewalk, she said. If you had not given her cocoa and let her put her hands on your piano and taken her home. She is going her home, moms, when it's for us. Bao mà tông bao. The bomb bishi. Luke shifted his ribs, protesting. Most people would have done something, he said. Most people did not, she replied. They sat with that for a while. She trusts you, Evelyn said. I watched it even before tonight, the way she stood near you, the way she looked for your face when I spoke. She does not know me that well, he said. You kept her alive long enough for me to find her, Evelyn said. That is knowing enough. Silence settled again, thicker this time, but not unfriendly. I have resources, she said at last. Security, a house that is larger than it needs to be, people who can help her heal. I can keep her safe in ways that a small apartment under the tracks cannot. I know, Luke said. He had thought through it already in the seconds between the van door slamming and the ambulance lights. He did not have the money or the legal standing or the power to do what came next for Zoe. He knew his limits. But I do not want to cut her off from the one place she has felt safe lately, Evelyn continued. From you, from Mia. Luke blinked. What are you saying? He asked. I am saying I would like you to stay in her life, she said. If you are willing, as a friend, as a teacher, as whatever she needs you to be. He let the idea settle. Teaching had once been his entire plan, before clubs and construction and hospital bills. You know, I am not exactly polished, he said. I am not looking for polished, she replied. I am looking for the person who grabbed a moving vehicle because a child was inside it. Her hand rested on the arm of the chair. He noticed the faint indent on her ring finger, the echo of a band long removed. You said you used to teach, she added. I have been thinking a long time about doing something with music for kids who do not get chances. Kids like the one she has been these last 3 years. I never quite knew how to start. Luke studied the ceiling. You are offering me a job in a hospital gown, he said. I am starting a conversation, she corrected. There will be others after this, when you can sit up without wincing every time you laugh. He chuckled once, then winced exactly as she described. See, she said softly, proof. They both looked at Zoe at the same time. Her breathing had settled into the even rhythm of deep sleep. One hand still reached out through the rail of the bed, fingers relaxed against the back of Luke's own. Lights dimmed as the night wore on. Nurses changed shifts. Somewhere around 3 a.m, a janitor mopped the hallway outside. Luke drifted in and out of sleep. Each time he woke, he saw Zoe curled in the chair and Evelyn head tipped back against the wall, eyes closed, hand resting lightly on her daughter's shoulder. 3 weeks later, the snow in the city had turned to a thin crust of gray along the curbs. Luke stood on a sidewalk in a neighborhood he had rarely entered, and one hand smoothing the front of a shirt that did not quite feel like his. Beside him, Mia craned her neck to look up at the row of townhouses, all brick and stone, and tall windows that glowed warm against the winter dusk. "You sure this is the right place?" she asked. He checked the address scribbled on the card in his pocket. The numbers matched those on the iron gate. "Looks like it," he said. Behind the gate, a path curved through a small front garden dusted with snow. At the end of it, a dark blue door waited, a wreath of green hanging at eye level. Mia slipped her gloved hand into his. "Okay," she said. "We knock, right?" He took a breath that reached his sore ribs and pressed the buzzer. The buzzer crackled, then a woman's voice came through, softened by the speaker. "Hello?" "Evelyn," Luke said toward the metal grill. "It is Luke, and Mia." There was a pause just long enough for his stomach to tighten. Then the lock on the gate clicked. "Come in," she said. "We are just inside." Mia pushed the gate with both hands. It swung open with a low squeak. They walked up the cleared path, their boots leaving damp marks on stone that had probably never seen this much salt in one season. Luke wiped his palms on his coat before he reached for the brass knocker. He did not need it. The door opened before he could touch it. Evelyn stood there, not in a suit, not in a perfectly coordinated coat, but in a soft sweater and jeans. Her feet were bare. For a second, the sight of her without heels and armor knocked him off balance, more than any van ever had. "You are here," she said, and the relief in her face made something in his chest unclench. Warm air spilled out into the cold. It carried the smell of roasting chicken butter, something with garlic. Mia leaned in, nose twitching. "That smells better than noodles," she whispered. "That does not take much," Luke whispered back. Evelyn stepped aside to let them in. The entryway was all smooth wood and soft rugs. A staircase curved up to the second floor. Light from a chandelier threw small reflections across the walls. Mia turned in a slow circle, taking it in. "This is like a movie," she said under her breath. Her voice echoed a little in the high space. "Take your coats off," Evelyn said. "Zoe has been watching the window for you since lunch." At that, footsteps thundered on the stairs. Zoe appeared at the top, hair loose around her shoulders. She grabbed the railing and half slid, half ran down, hitting the bottom step a little hard. "You are late," she said, but she was already grinning. Mia did not wait. She dropped her hat and gloves onto the nearest table and met Zoe halfway, wrapping her in a hug that nearly knocked them both sideways. "You have stairs inside your house," Mia said into her shoulder. "That is illegal." "It is not illegal," Zoe said, laughing. "But it is weird. I keep tripping over the rugs." Luke shrugged out of his coat more slowly. His ribs still complained when he moved too fast. The bruises had gone from angry purple to dull yellow and green, a map of pain fading. Evelyn took his coat and hung it on a hook. "How is the shoulder?" she asked. "Better," he said. "I can lift the grocery bag without seeing stars. No piano hauling yet." "Good," she said. "I would prefer you not reenact any stunts in my foyer." They followed her into the dining room. The table was long enough to seat a dozen, but only 4 places were set clustered at one end. Plates, real ones that matched, glasses that caught the light. A candle flickered in the center, small and steady. Mia hesitated at the edge of the rug. "Where do we sit?" she asked. "Anywhere here," Evelyn said. "Zoe, show them." Zoe dragged a chair out for Mia with a flourish, then motioned to the one across from her. "You sit there," she told Luke. "That way I can see both of you." He lowered himself into the chair, careful of his ribs, and tried not to think about the last time he had sat at a table that did not wobble. The food tasted even better than it smelled. Roast chicken potatoes crisp at the edges, green beans that were not from a can. Mia's eyes widened at the first bite. "You cooked this?" she asked. Evelyn nodded. "I am not entirely helpless without assistance," she said. "I do not get to do it often." "You should," Mia said, "professionally." Conversation moved slowly at first, like everyone was afraid to speak too loudly in case the fragile balance shifted. Zoe talked about the way her room faced the backyard, about how she could see a tree that still held a few stubborn leaves. Mia told her about a squirrel that had tried to steal Captain Trash from the window ledge last week. Luke listened, answering, when someone looked at him, letting the rhythm build. Halfway through the meal, Evelyn set down her fork. "I have something I would like to ask," she said. Mia went quiet. Zoe looked up from her plate. "No one is going anywhere tonight," Evelyn added quickly. "This is not that kind of asking." Luke nodded once. "All right," he said. She folded her hands on the table. "I told you at the hospital that I have been thinking for a long time about doing something with music for kids who have had the kind of years Zoe has had," she said. "I have the money, the space, the connections. What I do not have is someone who can walk into a room full of scared children and make them believe they belong in front of a piano." Her gaze settled on Luke. "I think you can do that," she said. He shifted in his chair, the wood creaking under his weight. I can teach them to play, he said, believing they belong as a bigger assignment. You did it for Zoe, Evelyn said. You did it for Mia. You did it without a program or a budget. Just a broken piano and some cocoa. Mia ducked her head, smiling into her glass. Zoe reached for a roll and tore it into careful pieces. What would it look like? Luke asked. This thing you are building. A small start, she said. A pilot, they would call it, in a meeting. A room with instruments and a handful of kids from shelters and schools that do not have arts programs. Classes a few afternoons a week. We find out what works and grow from there. She paused. I would pay you, she added, properly. Enough that you would not need to play under the tracks unless you wanted to. He let that sink in. Rent paid on time, groceries that did not require mental calculations at every aisle, a heater that could be fixed without counting overtime hours first. He also saw pianos in front of kids who looked like Zoe had looked on that first night, hands jammed into pockets, eyes hungry for something they could not name. Evelyn Hart does not usually hire strangers who nearly die on public streets, he said. She smiled a little. That is true, she said. You are a rare case. He glanced at Mia. What do you think? He asked her. She gulped a mouthful of water and thought for a second. It means you would not have to carry the piano up all those stairs anymore, she said. And you would get to help kids. Also, Zoe would not be mad you were far away. Zoe made a face at that. I can still be mad, she said. Just less. Evelyn looked between them, amused and hopeful. Jobs usually come with contracts, she said. We can draw one up. Responsibilities, hours, all of that. But in simple terms, I am asking if you would work with me. He held her gaze. You are sure you want to tie this to us, he said. To me, to all the mess that comes with the corners I live on. I am not tying it to where you live, she said. I am tying it to who you have already shown me you are. Silence stretched for a moment, filled only by the faint tick of a clock somewhere in the house. Luke took a breath. Then yes, he said. I will do it. Zoe let out a cheer that startled even her. Mia grinned so hard her eyes nearly closed. Evelyn exhaled a sound that carried weeks of tension. Thank you, she said. It did not feel like the same kind of thank you she had said on the street. This one sounded more like an agreement. After dinner, Zoe pulled Mia by the hand. Come on, she said. You have to see the music room. They went down a short hallway past framed photos that Luke did not stop to study. The floor changed from wood to carpet that swallowed their footsteps. The music room was at the back of the house. One wall was all windows looking out onto a small yard where snow lay smooth and untouched. A single tree stood near the fence, branches traced against the dark sky. In the center of the room, under a low ceiling light, sat a grand piano. It was the kind Luke had played on only a handful of times in his life. Glossy black lid, closed keys hidden. Its curves caught the reflections from the window, the chandelier, the room. Mia stopped just inside the doorway. It is so shiny, she whispered. If you touch it, does it yell at you? It does not yell, Zoe said, but it is very loud when you play the low notes. She went to the instrument and ran her fingers lightly along the edge of the lid. The gesture was almost reverent. Evelyn stood back for a moment, watching all three of them. Then she stepped forward. May I show you something? She asked. She reached into her pocket and took out the small velvet box. This time she opened it. Inside lay a pendant very much like the one at Zoe's throat. Same shape, same shine. The engraving on the front read the same initials. On the back there was a single letter, M. Zoe frowned. You carried the other one all this time? Luke asked. Yes, Evelyn said. I could not bring myself to put it away. I had the back engraved again last week. She looked at Mia. If she is all right with it, she said, I would like this one to belong to you. Mia stared at the pendant as if it were a fragile piece of glass. To me, she asked. You have been her sister longer than I have known about it, Evelyn said. Seems right to mark that. Mia looked at Zoe. Is that weird? She asked. I do not have to. I can just look at it sometimes. Zoe shook her head vigorously. It is not weird, she said. Then we all match, you, me, and Mom. She touched the spot where her own necklace lay under the collar of her shirt. Mia held still while Evelyn fastened the chain around her neck. The metal was cool against her skin. Her fingers found the pendant and closed around it. Luke watched the three of them, the way their hands moved, the way the light from the window washed across their faces. Zoe slid onto the piano bench and patted the space beside her. Sit, she said. All of you. Mia climbed up without hesitation. She squeezed in on Zoe's right. Luke hesitated only long enough to calculate how much his ribs could take, then eased himself onto the left side. Evelyn took the last strip of bench perched at the edge close enough that their shoulders brushed. 4 pairs of hands hovered over the keys. "Start it," Zoe said to Evelyn. "Please." Evelyn placed her fingers on the opening notes of the lullaby. The same 3 high sounds drifted into the room, soft and clear. They did not have to fight train noise or city air now. They hung in the space between the polished wood and the glass pure. Luke found the lower harmony without thinking. Mia tapped out single notes on top, following Zoe's lead. When the place came where the second voice was meant to join, Zoe stepped in. Her part slid above Evelyn's and into the spaces Luke left open. Their shoulders touched. Their breathing settled into the same slow rhythm. Outside, snow began to fall again in thin, straight lines, catching the backyard light as it came down. The tree branches gathered a fresh dusting. Inside, fingers moved across the keys, hesitant at first, then surer. The lullaby wound around itself, the question and answer, chasing each other through the melody. Luke glanced at the others on the bench. Zoe's face had relaxed, her eyes half closed. Mia watched her hand's tongue peeking out at the corner of her mouth as she focused. Evelyn looked at the keyboard, but her expression was somewhere else, a mix of grief and something warmer. He let his gaze return to the keys and settled his hands among theirs. The song did not solve anything. It did not fix bruises or erase the years that had gone wrong. It did something smaller and just as necessary. It held all of them in the same rhythm for a little while, in the same light, in the calm sound. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.